Hello, my friends. This is Paul with B&B Theaters. I hope wherever you are watching this video, you're safe, you're healthy, and you remain that way as long as possible. We're still closed while we wait out this quarantine situation. We can't bring the magic of the movies to you like we would like, but we are reaching out to some of our friends in production, in distribution, some studio executives to sort of pull back the curtain on how the movie magic gets made. And I'm joined today by a bit of a heavy hitter, Jon Landau. How are you, Jon?
I am doing well. I hope all of your people are as well. I know these are very difficult times and challenging times, but when we come out of moments like this as societies, people need movies. And I truly believe that people are going to be coming back to the theaters, and we're going to be there for them with content, and you're going to be there with them with theaters, and going to provide the escape that everybody needs to put this behind us.
Hey, thank you. So good. We could stop the interview right now. That's a perfect summary. I couldn't say it better myself. You, sir, are a film producer, among other things. I feel like what directors do. I feel like I know what writers do, what actors do generally. What is it that a producer does, or an executive producer, as the case may be?
Well, look, I'll tell you how I produce. You know, I look at every movie as a startup company. And our business plan is our script. And as a producer, I have to put together a team of people to bring a product to the marketplace that meets, if not exceeds, the public's expectations. And to do that, I need to find the right team of people. Other companies might need to hire engineers. We need to hire production designers. Other ones might need to hire mechanics. We need to hire cinematographers. But who's right as a cinematographer for one movie might not be right for another production time. So I have to put together this team of people that lead us to a championship. And then how I do my job, and I'm not saying every producer does their job this way, I get involved every step of the way in everything, from the script, to the casting, to the design elements. Now, look, I'm not saying that I have final say when I'm working with someone like Jim. I certainly don't. But filmmaking is a collaborative art form, and Jim knows that. And there were times when we have to bifurcate. We both can't be in every place all the time. So there are moments where Jim will go off and be in one area, and I'll be what I call stirring the pot in the art department. It ultimately runs through Jim, of course, but it's helping them move things forward. Then I'm involved in the day-to-day, production of it. What are the strategies we use? What are the technologies we use? How do we keep our crews motivated and going? And then it trickles down to the editing side, post-production sound, marketing, publicity, and with movies like we're lucky enough to be a part of, such as Avatar, the whole franchise of it. And what does that mean? I think that, franchise is all of it. It includes the movies, but it's all of the other ancillary opportunities as well, from the theme park at Disney World to video games we're doing with Massive to a publishing deal. All of those things, it's my job to make sure that we bring to it stewardship of our IP and our content. That was a long-winded answer, but I'm lucky enough to be involved in projects that allow me to take on that breadth and scope. At the end of the day, though, I know that I'm sitting here talking to you, not because of my talents, other than hiring the best people. I'm actually standing on their shoulders, because it is that team that enables us, and we have hundreds of people in a multitude of disciplines who enable us to make the movies we're making.
That's a great answer. It's very much in line, too. I've done a couple of these other interviews with some sound editors, with some studio executives, and they all sort of say the same message, that it takes a village, definitely, to make something happen. It seems, though, that maybe like production is in your blood to some degree. You're the son of a couple of professional and somewhat prolific producers. Is this something that you aspired to as a young person, or just sort of happened by virtue of your association?
Truth be told, as many young people do, I aspired to go into sports. I aspired to, do something. I was a jock growing up, and I was always fascinated by the film industry, thanks to my parents. And I actually went to film school not necessarily thinking about producing, but maybe thinking about maybe one of the more technical areas of it. And I just migrated into the producing side of it. And then you realize you are a product of the environment you grow up in. And I couldn't help that. I'm around my parents, and they did the exact, in many ways, on a scope and scale basis, opposite type of movies that I made. They made small, independent, what today might be called art films. But what is consistent between an art film and a big film is story. It's about the stories you tell. And I got that through osmosis by being around my parents, not by studying it, not by going and being at their work, but by just the daily conversations they would have around the house, that they would have with each other. And I picked up on that. And when I got out into the industry, I didn't know what path I would take. And this is something I tell students when I speak at schools. I said, don't define your career path. Take opportunities that are presented in front of you and let your career path develop on its own, and be open to any of those different ideas. So my path to doing what I'm doing, very untraditional, which also included a stint for 5 years or so as an executive vice president at 20th Century Fox. I was the studio executive. So, but these opportunities presented itself. And, I tell a story on the first movie I ever worked on out of school. It was a small television movie with Dick Van Dyke and Sid Caesar. And I was offered the opportunity to be a set production assistant. And I thought to myself, how great, I'm going to get to see how they make real movies. Well, when I got there, my assignment was to go 4 blocks away and lock up the traffic and not let anybody walk on the sidewalk. So I, in 6 weeks, never saw any of the filming because my back was to the set and I was out there. The producer then asked me if I wanted to do some filing in accounting.
Okay.
Now, I had no interest in filing, no interest really in accounting, but I said yes. So I spent the next 2 weeks filing. Now, I learned more in those 2 weeks than the 6 weeks on the set. Now, I read everything I was filing. I might not have been supposed to do that, but I did. And I learned more from that. So I think that learning opportunities can come out of the most unexpected situations, and then you apply that later. And that's one of the great things I love about working on films, is that every new project for me is a new opportunity to learn, take experience that I could then later apply onto the next project.
That's great. And I guess just put your head down and do your job as best as you can, even if it's just blocking the sidewalk.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, there were people that I met on that show that I later worked with because of the relationships I developed. And I tell people also in our industry, it's very transient in the sense that you work on one project and then it's over. Then you're going to have to go look for another job, and you work on another project and it's over. And that once you have a job, you are now working for your next job. And somebody you meet, somebody you interact with on that job you're currently on is going to be the reason you get your next job. And I could look back at my career and go, okay, I met that person, they got me that. That person introduced me to that. And keep that in mind. Don't ever get there and say, oh, wow, look, I have this job, I'm set, and you become complacent. No, you're there to impress people, to live up to the standards you have for yourself, because out of that will become the next opportunity.
That's great advice. I probably need to be writing that one down. I found an interesting quote from your dad when he was talking about the American Film Theater series. He essentially translated these classic stage productions to film, and then you know what it is, but
right.
they showed at movie theaters. He talked about how he was bucking the trend, essentially redefining the guest experience, and so much of your film catalog seems to be kind of doing that too. Just these really progressive projects that are tremendous leaps forward technologically or in terms of production. I suspect maybe that people tend to talk to you about 2 films in particular. For me, though, the ones that I think are most appealing are Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Dick Tracy, man, which is one of my absolute favorite films.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I love just the artistry of that film, the cast, the colors. It's a lot of fun. And that was, it's 30 years ago now. What was gleaned from those production efforts that maybe continue to inform your career decades down the line?
Well, let's start with Dick Tracy because, I think that to me was really the first production that I got involved in the more traditional artistic side of a movie. And I don't mean the movie, I'm talking about production design, I'm talking about cinematography, all of those things. And Warren Beatty, who was a consummate director, had directed Reds and all these other movies. He was there and he was on screen.
Hmm.
And because he had to worry about being an actor, I'd never worked with a director actor before. He didn't have the time that was required to spend time with Dick Silbert in the production office, with Milena Canonero in costumes, with John Caglione and Doug Drexler on the makeup and stuff. So suddenly I found myself being his eyes and ears in that. And that included dailies. Warren, dailies is when you would send film to the lab and the next day you'd come back and watch it. Now we don't have to do that because things are digital, but Warren wouldn't go to dailies. His attitude was, John, I have you, I have Richie Marks, our editor, I have Vittorio Storaro, all doing these things. And I went back to Warren on a couple of different occasions and go, okay, Warren, I'm looking at what we're doing outside on the streets of New York. And it doesn't match what we're doing inside. And when I say New York, because it was the New York back lot,
Yeah.
But it doesn't match the designs of our sets inside, which were much more colorful, much more really off of the comic book pages.
Okay.
And Warren said, okay, you get together with Dick Silbert and Vittorio and you guys work it out. And it was out of that conversation and out of the subsequent conversations I had that Dick and the team came up with the idea of let's paint all the buildings so that when we're suddenly now that outside world matched the inside world where we were already doing that. Vittorio was already painting the streets awash with color from his lighting, but the building stood out as more traditional and more grounded. But that shift changed everything.
I would say, yeah.
And it was a great learning experience for me, and Warren was very open to that. And we had several of those instances throughout the movie where suddenly I was taking an active role, a proactive role, I should say, in areas of design that I might not have before.
Wow, that's amazing, and it worked. Yeah, that movie holds up.
And Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was a movie that I came on to after they had been set up with an original director. So I came on, Joe Johnston came on, Penny Finkelman came on. There was one person who was staying on the production, though. It was a gentleman by the name of Tom Smith. And Tom was the visual effects producer on the show. He had run Industrial Light and Magic for a while. And the first book about ILM that he wrote it. And I felt I'm going in and I should read the book on the plane. It was like, a 400-page book. And I read it and I landed and I met him for the first time. And I said, I read your book. And he goes, no, everybody says that. Thank you. Right. And I said, no, there's a typo on page 247. And sure enough, he looked and there was. And that established to him that I was being honest with him, that I was being upfront with him. But why I want to tell that story is because visual effects is something that I had dabbled in with making Mr. Right before Honey. But Honey was really the first big show that I did that had that many visual effects. And I took to learning the craft of visual effects and the techniques and trying to really understand it. When I then went on to doing Dick Tracy, Warren Beatty, who had much more experience than I did, Vittorio Storaro, who had much more experience than I did, Dick Silbert, more experience, none of them had ever really done a single visual effect shot. So all of a sudden, here I was being the expert in that area because of this past experience I had. And it helped me on the early stages develop a relationship with Vittorio, develop a relationship with Dick that laid the groundwork where later I could go back and challenge them on certain things that were outside of visual effects because we had built up this relationship.
Well, it seems obvious now how your experience with those kinds of practical elements, your relationship building, how that could lay a foundation for what was to come. Your collaboration with James Cameron has been the stuff of legends. You've created content that has broken and rebroken records over and over. I know this is territory that you've rehashed 1,000 times over, but how did that come about, the initial collaboration between you two?
Well, I met Jim when I was the executive vice president of 20th Century Fox. Jim was doing True Lies at the time.
Okay.
And through a series of circumstances, we as a studio decided to get more involved in the movie than we thought we would. And I had only met Jim once in passing before that. And Peter Chernin, who was head of the studio at the time, said to Jim, "Hey, Jim, we're going to get Jon involved." And all of a sudden, I became the point person on a very opposite side of the fence. I was the studio side, Jim was the other side. But we managed through the True Lies process, not always seeing eye to eye, right? But building up a mutual respect for each other, that when I later then made the decision to leave Fox, Jim and a number of other directors came and said, "Hey, Jon, why don't you come produce this movie with me? Why don't you come do this with me?" And it was because of that foundation I had with Jim, having done True Lies, where again, there were times where we did this. But what I learned on that, and again, it's something else I try to tell people, is you have to have an opinion, but it's not good enough just to have the opinion. You have to be able to articulate the reasoning behind the opinion. And I think that's where I gained Jim's respect. I didn't just come in and say, "Jim, we should do something this way." I would say, "Jim, I think we should do something this way, and here's the reason why I think we should do something." Now, again, he didn't always agree with that, but he knew that I was thinking about it and not just parroting something else someone might have told me or just going off of an unthought about gut reaction. And that's what set me up. And when I decided to leave, Jim asked me if I'd be interested in doing a project called Planet Ice with him. And Planet Ice was the code name for Titanic.
Gotcha. That one worked out pretty well, I guess. First film to gross $1 billion, ended up grossing over $2 billion, I think, with the re-release in 2012. Does the production of a film like that, is it essentially the same as a production for Dick Tracy, just scaled exponentially? Or is it rewriting the book entirely?
It's a combination of both, and I think every production has all the trials and tribulations of any other production. No movie is easy to make. A $1 million movie, a $100 million movie, none of them are easy. And the reason movies cost more is because you're trying to do more. You're trying to go out there and say, we're building an 800-foot ship. We're not building a 800 square foot set for My Dinner with Andre. It's different things. So I think from the basic principles of a movie are different. I looked at Titanic when we were doing it as perhaps the last opportunity from a production standpoint to make an old-fashioned movie where we built the sets, where we built the costumes, where we had 1,000 extras for 40 days of our shoot to populate the ship. Because we were just on the cusp of digital and we knew where that might be going. And felt that when it did, some of that stuff would go away. And I'm very thankful that for Titanic, it was still there, because building that 800-foot set gave the cast, gave the crew this on-set transportive experience of feeling like they were really walking back into history. And I would tell people at the time that movies prior to Titanic used visual effects to take people to the future or to a fantasy world. And we wanted to use visual effects to make people feel a part of history. And that's what we were able to do with Titanic. Now, the complexities of the shoot, that's what makes it interesting. How do we sit there and implode the dome on the grand staircase? How do we sink that set? Those are all the things that get you up and going, every day. Now, there were times where we were going, oh my God, are we going to be able to do this or not? And I remember in the latter days of pre-production that I went out to a bookstore. This was before the days of Amazon. And I bought a book for every one of our department heads who were doubting that we'd be able to get there. And I inscribed that book saying to each one, I know we can, I know we can. And the book was the little engine that could.
Love it.
And gave that to them. And I think one of the most rewarding moments that I've had around that is when we were doing Avatar. We once again felt that challenge of the impending start of production. And one of our crew members who was with us on Titanic came into my office and handed me the book that I had given them so many years earlier.
That's great. Well, it seems too that, I guess in terms of I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just me speculating.
I don't know what I'm talking about either, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, sure. That the scope of production from a film like Titanic to Avatar has got to be similar in the sense that these are giant, spectacular films, but one of them was largely done digitally. I mean, so then is it just a matter of you being more present in front of the computer monitor versus in front of the sets and the props, or how dramatically different is it?
It's dramatically different. I think, as I said, Titanic was the last of an era. And in many ways, we viewed Avatar as the first of an era.
Sure.
And we were journeying down a path that no one had ever gone down before. And we had to learn to bob and weave and adjust along that path. Because if you've never gone down a path before, you can't predict correctly what's there or what's not there. So here it was, trying to take the paradigm of live action filming and create that in a virtual world. And everybody today is talking about virtual reality. Mm-hmm. We made Avatar with virtual reality effectively. We put Jim in a virtual world where he was able to hold up a virtual camera, see virtual characters. The camera would pan around the stage we were on. He wouldn't see the stage, he'd see the virtual world. And it was trying to use technology to allow a director like Jim to work with the same intimacy with the cast, because movies are all about the characters you put up on the screen. The same intimacy with the cast that he worked with Kate and Leo on Titanic, or Mary Elizabeth and Ed on The Abyss, or Sigourney on Aliens, et cetera, et cetera. So it was gearing a process around the actor-director relationship. And I think that's what our cast and Jim came both to find out and came to love.
Well, I started in the movie business as a theater manager in late 2008. And so I hadn't been there long when our first digital projector arrived, just in time for the release of Avatar, actually specifically because of Avatar. And so I remember that film as the beginning of like the exciting time. I mean, it was a blockbuster in every sense. Like we had building, crowds wrapped around the building and hustling to get this projector installed. James Cameron seems to be always aggressively pushing technology forward. Is that a rewarding place to be as a producer, or is it infuriating in the sense that you're constantly trying to keep up?
There's nothing more rewarding than trying and accomplishing something new.
Yeah.
The way I describe what we try to do is we try to be the momentum slightly ahead of the wave. Because if you're ahead of the wave, that wave will carry you. If you wait till you're on the peak of the wave, you have a chance of falling down the backside of it. But we believe that we could be the impetus to drive the wave. So you talk about the theaters becoming digital. Well, for 2.5 years before Avatar came out, I was traveling the globe, literally, showing material in digital projection, in 3D, showing people what it could be. Because you can't overnight just turn on the switch. You have to continue, to push it. And today we are still doing that. We are big proponents of laser projection. We are big proponents of high dynamic range. We are big proponents of high frame rates. Now, not as a selling point. You don't go, hey, go see this in a high frame rate. No. Just like you don't go say, hey, go see this in Atmos. It just is. And because it's a better presentation for the audience, the movie shouldn't change. You have to learn how to work with these mediums. Many people were afraid to venture into digital cinema because they didn't think it would look like film. Well, people learned how to do it, learned how to shoot digitally and make it look like film. I believe the same thing about high frame rate. We can learn how to make it, and an audience won't even know. They just won't get the blurring. They won't get the shuddering, but you light it, you treat it the same way, and audience, it'll be an improved experience. And I think that's together what we have an obligation to do is to continue to create content on our side and experiences on your side that warrant people getting out of their house to get something they can't get at home.
Amen. When you're in production right now for the Avatar sequels, we've got one in 2020, I think, 2023, 2025, and 2027. How is, I mean, I can't even imagine trying to establish a production schedule for a single film. How do you map out a production schedule over the better part of a decade?
You know, really looked at it like you might look at a miniseries. You know, when somebody went back and did the long 8-10 hour miniseries, that's what we're doing. What took us so long initially was to get the scripts in the right place, because we couldn't start production on movie 2 until we knew where movie 5 was ending and had to answer all those questions in between. And we are making each movie to be a standalone movie that is rewarding as a cinema experience, but also as an emotional experience. And each movie comes to its own conclusion. However, when looked at as a whole, the 4 movies together create an even larger epic saga. And at the heart of our movies, and the heart of any Jim Cameron's movies, are relatable themes. But in the Avatar sequels, the most relatable theme possible is family. So at the heart of each of our sequels is the Sully family, Jake and Neytiri's family. It is their story. It is their story about the lengths they will go to keep their family together, to protect their children, and what are the sacrifices that one has to make in order to do that.
Jon, I thank you for your time. Let me ask you one more question maybe before I cut you loose here. In preparation for this conversation today, I watched Avatar last night with my 7-year-old son. He hadn't seen it before. And I said to him, man, this is a great movie. I know he enjoyed it, but I said, this is really, I wish you could have seen it in the theater when it was new. And so many of your films and of James Cameron's films, they seem to belong on the big screen. What is it about that experience that you think maybe makes these films so spectacular and enhances their presentation?
You know, number one, I think it's story. I think it's story first and foremost, the characters you put up there, the empathy you create for those characters. But what the in-theater experience does, when the lights go down, audiences start to forget about things that they've left at home, whether that's a bill from a doctor, a report card from their student, their child from school, whether that's worrying about the baby crying in the next room. And for the next couple of hours or whatever the length is, they are transported to another world, the world that we are creating and putting up on screen. At home, no matter how big your TV screen is, you can't get that. You're still in your living room or your media room or your bedroom. You're still worried about the phone ringing and all of those things. And I also believe that there's an innate instinct in people to share things with one another. And the movie-going experience is communal. A comedy plays funnier in a room full of people. A tragedy plays sadder in a room full of people. While we live in a digital age, and much has been said about the music business and how you can now, Spotify, Pandora, Sirius, get all of this music. None of that replaces the live concert experience. And people still yearn for that. The visual equivalent of that is the theater. We are the live concert of visual entertainment, and people will continue to go, and we have a responsibility to deliver them the best product and the best quality experience they can have when they make that commitment to leave their homes.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the industry, of course, but on behalf of myself and B&B Theaters, thank you for the content that you've given us over the years. And
And you know what? And I want to thank you, and I want to thank B&B, because I am a firm believer that our industry does not exist because of the two coasts. It does not exist because of the big metropolises. It exists because of all the small towns around our country where people want to go out, and they are the ones that sustain our business. And I'm very fortunate that I have a home in the Florida Keys, and less than a mile from my home is a B&B theater. And I go there all the time, and I love going there. And I love the welcome that your staff gives, not just to me, but to all of the people in our neighborhood. It reminds them of how great it is to go to a theater in our community. So to all of B&B, thank you. Well, together we will get through these times, and together we will see great success after these times.
All right. Thank you so much, Jon. I appreciate your time today.
Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.